Welcome to our deep dive today. We're
Okay.
diving into Carl Jung's The Undiscovered Self.
Oh, yeah. I'm excited about this one.
It's a collection of essays
Right.
written back in the 1950s,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to uncover some seriously insightful stuff
Yeah?
about the push and pull between
Right.
being an individual and fitting into society.
Hmm.
You ready to explore some of your hidden depths?
I think what makes this deep dive so interesting
Okay.
is that Jung was writing these essays right in the thick of the Cold War.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, the world was on edge,
Right.
divided between these two massive ideologies.
Yeah, capitalism and communism. It
Exactly.
was like this epic battle of ideas, right?
It was.
And you can feel that tension in Jung's writing.
Hell, absolutely.
It wasn't just some abstract backdrop.
Right.
It really informed his thinking about the individual versus the collective.
Exactly. He saw parallels between the intense pressure to conform in totalitarian states
Uh-huh.
and the subtler but still present pressures in democratic societies.
Yeah.
It's like, regardless of the political system,
Mm-hmm.
Jung was worried that the individual was getting lost in the shuffle.
He even came up with this term,
Yeah.
the statistical man,
Right.
to describe this trend.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever felt like you were being reduced to just a data point,
Oh, yeah.
like a bunch of numbers on a spreadsheet?
It's like that feeling you get when you're scrolling through social media
Huh.
and you see all these perfectly curated profiles.
Right.
You start to wonder, are those people really that perfect?
Yeah.
Or are they just presenting a carefully constructed image of themselves to the world?
It's like they've become a brand, not a person.
Yeah.
And Jung would probably say that's exactly the problem.
I think so.
We're so focused on fitting in, on
Hmm.
conforming to these external expectations,
Right.
that we lose touch with our own unique individuality.
And that can be dangerous, according to Jung.
Oh.
He was deeply concerned about the erosion of individual thought.
Yeah.
And the potential for tyranny, even in societies that claim to value freedom.
Wow.
He even said, and this is a powerful quote,
Yeah.
the mass crushes out the insight and reflection that are still possible with the individual. And this necessarily leads to doctrinaire and authoritarian tyranny if a better possibility does not intervene.
That's a pretty stark warning, right?
Yeah.
It makes you think about all the ways we're pressured to conform,
Right.
even in subtle ways,
Hmm.
and how important it is to cultivate our own critical thinking skills.
Jung wasn't advocating for any specific political system.
Okay.
He was more concerned with the individual.
Uh-huh.
And with this process, he called individuation.
Individuation, that sounds intense.
It is, in a way. It's like
Huh.
this ongoing journey of becoming a complete,
Mm.
integrated individual.
Okay.
Think of it like a puzzle.
Okay.
You have all these different pieces, your
Mm.
conscious thoughts, your unconscious drives,
Mm-hmm.
your light side, your shadow side.
Mm-hmm.
And individuation is about fitting all those pieces together
Yeah.
to create a whole picture of yourself.
So it's not about being selfish or rejecting society altogether.
No, not at all.
It's more about understanding and accepting all the different parts of yourself,
Exactly.
even the messy ones, so you can show up in the world as your authentic self.
That's a great way to put it. And Jung believed that a big part of individuation involves confronting what he called the shadow.
Okay, the shadow.
This is the part of ourselves that we tend to hide or repress.
Right. Our fears, our insecurities,
Exactly.
our darker impulses.
Yeah.
I can see why we might want to avoid that.
Right.
It's much easier to focus on our positive qualities
Sure.
and pretend the shadow doesn't exist.
It is tempting to do that. But Jung argued that failing to meet the shadow
Okay.
is actually more dangerous, he said.
Okay.
But the man who is only average is in danger of failing to meet the shadow, the inferior part of his personality, which, as we have seen, is equally a part of the wholeness of the self.
So it's like trying to build a house on a foundation with cracks in it. Eventually, the whole structure is going to become unstable.
Right.
We need to acknowledge and integrate our shadow side
Yes.
in order to become truly whole and grounded individuals.
Exactly. And Jung believed that by facing our shadow, we actually diminish its power over us. It's like bringing those hidden parts of ourselves into the light,
Uh-huh.
where we can understand them and integrate them into our personalities.
Now, all this talk about the shadow and individuation makes me wonder,
Yeah.
where does religion fit into Jung's thinking?
That's where things get even more fascinating.
Okay.
Jung explored the role of religion, not necessarily in the sense of organized dogma,
Mm-hmm.
but as a way for individuals to connect with something larger than themselves.
Okay.
a source of meaning and purpose.
So it's not about adhering to a specific set of beliefs,
Right.
but more about that universal human need
Yeah.
to find something that transcends our everyday lives
Exactly.
and gives us a sense of connection to something bigger.
Exactly. And for Jung, that something bigger could be found within ourselves,
Oh, wow.
in the depths of our own unconscious.
Hold on, the unconscious.
Yeah.
Isn't that just where all our repressed memories and dark secrets hang out?
Well, that's part of it.
Okay.
But Jung saw the unconscious as much more than just a repository for the things we want to forget.
Right.
He believed it was a wellspring of wisdom and creativity,
Okay.
a source of profound insights and potential.
That's a pretty radical idea, isn't it?
It is.
That the answers we're seeking might actually be found within ourselves,
Yeah.
not out there in the world.
Jung was a big believer in looking inward for those answers.
Mm-hmm.
He even said,
Okay.
the individual must therefore have a secret, i.e., something which is not yet known, which is only in the process of becoming.
That's so poetic.
It is.
It's like he's saying we're all works in progress, constantly evolving with hidden depths waiting to be discovered.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we actually access this unconscious wisdom?
Right.
Do we need to start analyzing our dreams or something?
That's one way to tap into the unconscious. But Jung also emphasized the importance of caution and a good understanding of psychological methods.
Mm.
He said, to concern oneself with the unconscious is an adventure that requires caution, patience, and a real knowledge of psychological methods.
So we're not just diving in head first without a plan.
Right.
There's a process, a methodology to this exploration of the unconscious.
Exactly. And there are different approaches to working with the unconscious,
Okay.
whether it's through dream analysis, active imagination, or engaging with creative activities.
That's fascinating.
It
I'm
is.
starting to see how all these ideas connect.
Yeah.
The shadow individuation, the unconscious.
It all ties together.
It's like a whole new way of understanding ourselves and the world around us.
And we've only just scratched the surface.
Right.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Jung's The Undiscovered Self.
Okay.
We've been exploring Jung's ideas
Right.
about the pressures of conformity and the importance of individuation,
Yeah.
especially in the context of the Cold War
Mm.
when he was writing. But what's so amazing
Okay.
is how relevant his ideas still feel today,
Yeah, I agree.
even though the world has changed so much.
It's almost eerie
Right.
how much his words resonate with our modern experience. I mean, think about the constant pressure
Yeah.
to present a perfect image on social media,
Oh, totally.
or the way algorithms feed us information that reinforces our existing beliefs. It's like
Yeah.
we're living in a Jungian experiment.
It really does make you wonder
Yeah.
what Jung would say about our digital age.
Right.
He was already wary of mass media back then,
Mm-hmm.
warning about its potential to manipulate and control the masses.
Yeah.
He even talked about psychic infection,
Okay. Psychic infection.
where collective anxieties and fears
Right.
could spread like wildfire through society.
And wouldn't social media be the ultimate breeding ground for a psychic infection?
Absolutely.
With everyone constantly connected and sharing their opinions, it's
Yeah.
easy to get swept up in a wave of collective fear
Yeah.
or outrage, even if it's not based on reality.
Absolutely. And then there's the whole issue of
Mm.
technology's impact on our inner lives.
Okay.
You know, Jung was writing before the internet, smartphones and artificial intelligence.
Right.
He was already concerned about the ways technology could distract us from our inner selves
Uh-huh.
and lead to a sort of spiritual emptiness.
That makes me think about all the time we spend scrolling through our phones,
Oh, yeah.
mindlessly consuming information,
Mm-hmm.
and disconnecting from the present moment. It's
Right.
like we're constantly plugged in, but never really fully present.
It's almost like technology is creating a new form of the statistical man,
Oh, wow.
reducing us to data points and algorithms instead of recognizing our unique humanity.
So if Jung were here today,
Yeah.
what advice do you think he'd give us for navigating this digital age without losing ourselves in the process?
Well, he'd probably start by reminding us of the importance of individuation,
Okay.
that journey of becoming a whole and integrated individual.
Right, because individuation isn't just some abstract concept.
Yeah.
It's a practical necessity
Yeah.
for navigating the complexities of modern life. But how do we actually cultivate individuation
Right.
in a world that's constantly trying to pull us in different directions?
Jung believed that the first step
Okay.
is becoming aware of the unconscious forces
Uh-huh.
that are shaping our thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors.
Right. Yeah.
That means paying attention to our dreams, our emotional reactions,
Mhm.
and the recurring patterns that emerge in our lives.
Okay.
It's about developing that inner observer who can step back
Right.
and see the bigger picture.
It's like becoming more mindful of our inner landscape, right?
Exactly.
Instead of just reacting to everything on autopilot, we start to notice the subtle cues and messages that our unconscious is sending us.
Exactly. And this is where Jung's idea of the shadow comes into play.
Okay, back to the shadow.
Remember, the shadow is that part of ourself
Right.
that we tend to hide or repress.
Our fears, our insecurities, our darker impulses. I have to admit, I'm still a bit squeamish about confronting my shadow.
I understand.
It feels like opening a Pandora's box of negative emotions and unpleasant truths.
I get it. But Jung believed that the more we try to suppress the shadow,
Right.
the more power it has over us.
So it's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater?
Yeah,
The harder you push it down, the more forcefully it pops back up.
that's a great analogy.
Thanks.
And Jung believed that by acknowledging and accepting our shadow, we actually diminish its power over us.
Okay.
It's like bringing those hidden parts of ourselves into the light,
Right.
where we can understand them and integrate them into our personalities.
So how do we actually do that?
Yeah.
How do we start integrating our shadow?
Well, one way is to pay attention to the things that trigger strong emotional reactions in us.
Okay.
Whether it's anger, fear, or resentment,
Mm-hmm.
those reactions often point to something in our shadow that needs to be acknowledged and addressed.
So instead of just reacting defensively
Yeah.
or trying to push those feelings away,
Right.
we pause and ask ourselves, what is this reaction telling me about myself?
Exactly.
What part of me is feeling threatened or triggered?
That's a great approach. And it's not about judging ourselves for having those feelings.
Okay.
It's about recognizing them as part of the wholeness of our being
Right.
and learning how to integrate them in a healthy way.
This reminds me of something you mentioned earlier
Yeah.
about the unconscious being a source of wisdom and creativity.
Uh-huh.
So it's not just about confronting our demons.
No.
It's also about tapping into a deeper well of insight and potential.
Exactly. Jung believed that the unconscious is filled with images, symbols, and archetypes
Okay.
that can guide us on our journey of individuation.
Right.
By paying attention to our dreams, engaging in creative activities, and exploring our inner world through practices like active imagination, we can access this deeper wisdom.
Okay, this is where things start to get a little mystical for me. Are you saying we all need to become mystics or gurus?
Not necessarily
Okay.
to find our undiscovered selves.
Okay, good.
Jung was a scientist at heart,
Right.
and he believed in a rational, empirical approach to understanding the psyche. But he also recognized the limitations of purely rational thought.
Okay.
He believed that there are dimensions of human experience
Yeah.
that can't be fully grasped through logic or reason alone.
So it's about finding a balance between reason and intuition
Exactly.
in the head and the heart.
Exactly. And that's where Jung's idea of archetypes comes into play.
Now, we talked about archetypes briefly in the last part,
Yeah.
but can you remind us what they are and how they relate to all of this?
Archetypes are like universal patterns of energy and imagery that reside in the collective unconscious, a deeper layer of the unconscious
Okay.
that Jung believed is shared by all humanity.
So like a universal unconscious?
Yeah, you could say that.
Okay.
They're not just stereotypes or fixed personality types. They represent fundamental human experiences and motivations.
So they're like these universal blueprints
Yeah.
for human behavior and storytelling.
Exactly. And Jung believed that by understanding these archetypes,
Okay.
we can gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
Can you give us some examples of archetypes?
Well, one of the most well-known archetypes is the hero.
The hero. Okay.
It's not about a specific person or character.
Right.
It's about a universal pattern of behavior and symbolism that represents the journey of overcoming obstacles, facing fears, and achieving a higher goal.
Oh.
We see the hero archetype manifest in myths, fairy tales, movies, literature, and even in our own lives.
That's fascinating.
It is.
So the hero archetype is like this blueprint for a certain kind of story
Right.
that resonates with us on a deep level.
Precisely. And we all have the potential
Yeah.
to embody aspects of the hero archetype in our own lives.
Right.
It's about facing our challenges with courage, pursuing our goals with determination, and ultimately striving to make a positive impact on the world.
I can see how that archetype would be especially relevant today, given all the challenges we're facing as a society.
Yeah, definitely.
It's almost like we need a collective hero to inspire us to rise to the occasion.
And that hero can be found within each of us.
Oh, wow.
It's about recognizing that we all have the potential to be heroes in our own lives,
Right.
to make a difference, to fight for what we believe in, and to overcome the obstacles that stand in our way.
That's a really empowering thought.
It is. And Jung believed that by connecting with these archetypal energies,
Okay.
we can tap into a source of strength and wisdom
Right.
that can help us navigate the challenges of life.
Okay, I'm starting to get a sense of how these archetypes can be valuable tools for understanding ourselves and others.
Definitely.
But how do we actually work with them?
Right.
It all seems a bit abstract.
Well, one way to start working with archetypes
Okay.
is to pay attention to the recurring patterns and symbols that appear in our dreams, our relationships,
Okay.
and even in the stories and movies we're drawn to.
Right.
What characters or figures do you find yourself identifying with
Okay.
or feeling repelled by?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
It's like those personality quizzes
Uh-huh.
that tell you what Hogwarts house you belong to
Right.
or what your Myers-Briggs type is.
Exactly.
But instead of just labeling ourselves,
Yeah.
we're using these archetypes as a way to explore the deeper patterns and motivations
Right.
that drive our behavior.
Exactly. And it's not about trying to fit ourselves neatly
Correct.
into one archetype or another.
Right.
It's about recognizing that we all embody different archetypal energies
Yeah.
at different times in our lives.
It's like we're playing different roles on the stage of life.
That's a great way to put it.
Sometimes we're the hero, sometimes the caregiver,
Right.
sometimes the rebel, and sometimes the seeker.
And each of those roles has its own unique set of strengths and challenges.
Right.
The key is to become aware of which archetypes we're embodying at any given time, and to use that awareness to make conscious choices
Yeah.
about how we want to live our lives.
So instead of being unconsciously driven by these archetypal energies,
Right.
we become more conscious and intentional
Exactly.
how we express them.
Exactly. And that's a big part of what individuation is all about.
Okay.
Becoming more conscious and intentional about who we are
Right.
and how we want to show up in the world.
This is all incredibly fascinating.
It is.
But before we get too carried away with archetypes,
Yeah.
I want to bring us back to the question we posed at the end of the last part.
Mhm.
If Jung were alive today,
Hmm.
how do you think he'd view our modern world?
Hmm.
What would he say about the role of technology,
Right.
the rise of social media,
Hmm.
or the challenges to individual freedom in the digital age?
Those are great questions.
Yeah.
And I think they're exactly the kinds of questions Jung would be grappling with if you were here today.
Right.
He was a deep thinker who was always trying to understand the complex interplay
Mm-hmm.
between the individual and society,
Yeah.
the conscious and the unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
And he wouldn't shy away from asking tough questions
Right.
about how technology is shaping our lives and our minds.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into Carl Jung's The Undiscovered Self.
Okay.
We've been on quite a journey,
Yes.
exploring everything from the shadow to archetypes.
Right.
And now we're trying to imagine
Yeah.
how Jung would view our modern world with all its technological advancements and social media frenzy.
I think he'd be both fascinated and concerned by the power of technology
Yeah.
to shape our thoughts, our behaviors,
Right.
and even our sense of self.
He was already warning about the dangers of mass media back in the 1950s, right?
Oh, absolutely.
We talked about psychic infections, where collective anxieties and fears could spread like wildfire through society.
Yeah, like a virus almost.
It's almost like he predicted the rise of social media
Mhm.
and the echo chambers we find ourselves in today.
It's really striking how relevant his observations are to our current situation.
Yeah.
You know, he saw how easily people could be swayed by propaganda and groupthink,
Right.
especially when those messages tapped into unconscious fears and desires.
And wouldn't he have a field day with the algorithms that drive social media?
Oh, I think so, for sure.
They're designed to keep us engaged, to feed us content that aligns with our existing beliefs.
Right.
And to create these filter bubbles
Yeah.
where we're only exposed to information that reinforces our worldview.
It's like the ultimate confirmation bias machine.
It is.
And it's easy to see how this could lead to a kind of collective delusion,
Oh, wow.
where people become increasingly isolated from opposing viewpoints
Right.
and lose the ability to think critically and independently.
So if you were here today, what advice do you think he'd give us for navigating the digital landscape without losing our sense of self?
I think he'd start by reminding us that technology is a tool.
Okay.
And like any tool, it can be used for good or for ill.
Right.
It all depends on our intentions and our awareness.
Right. It's not about demonizing technology,
Oh.
but about using it consciously and intentionally.
Exactly.
Rather than letting it use us.
Exactly. And that means cultivating a healthy skepticism,
Okay.
questioning the information we're bombarded with,
Mm-hmm.
and seeking out diverse perspectives.
It's about being active participants in the digital world.
Yes.
Not passive consumers.
Jung would also probably emphasize the importance of spending time in nature,
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
engaging in creative activities and cultivating meaningful relationships,
Right.
things that nourish our souls and remind us of what it means to be human.
It's like he'd be saying, don't forget to unplug and reconnect with your inner self, with the natural world, with the things that truly matter.
That's a beautiful way to put it, and I think it goes hand in hand with his emphasis on individuation.
Because in a world that's increasingly driven by algorithms and conformity,
Hmm.
individuation becomes even more essential.
It does.
It's about reclaiming our agency, our ability to think for ourselves,
Yes.
and to make choices that are aligned with our values and our deepest desires.
Jung saw individuation as a lifelong journey, a process of becoming more whole and integrated as individuals.
Right.
And in a world that's constantly trying to fragment our attention
Yeah,
and reduce us to data points,
it's true.
that journey of individuation becomes even more challenging,
Right.
but also even more vital.
So it's not just about reading Jung or understanding his theories.
Right.
It's about putting those ideas into practice in our own lives.
Yeah, I think so.
Making conscious choices about how we engage with technology, how we cultivate our inner selves,
Right.
and how we create a meaningful life in a world that often feels chaotic and overwhelming.
Well said, and I think that's a perfect note to end on.
Yeah.
Jung's work offers us a rich and complex tapestry of ideas.
It does.
But ultimately, it's up to each of us to weave those ideas into the fabric of our own lives.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the mind of Carl Jung.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope it sparked some new insights and inspired you to continue exploring your own undiscovered self.
And remember, as Jung himself said, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed.
Wow.
So let's keep those reactions going, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
Until next time, happy exploring.